Now, I want to talk about a bit of a bigger story. This was one that I think is going to pave the way for some very, very interesting things. So this use case was announced, I believe, Monday. I can't remember. We'll have to check. But basically, this is a new investment body, Canary Trust, that's coming from Steve McClurg, who was the former chief investment officer at Valkyrie Funds. And Valkyrie Funds, as we know, issued a Bitcoin ETF. So this is Canary Trust is a new entity that is an institutional access point for investors to gain exposure to HBAR in a managed way. So if we look at the post from Canary Funds announcing this, growth, risk management, and foresight, introducing Canary Capital, a crypto-focused firm providing sophisticated investment solutions, and our first private trust offering the Canary HBAR Trust, investing in HBAR. So this is, again, if you are a large investor that doesn't want to dip your toes into crypto so much or have a wallet holding HBAR with private keys and all these different types of things, you can do business with Canary Capital and get exposure to HBAR. We've seen this in a few different places, but this is the latest one. It felt similar on the surface to quite a few other announcements like this, but there's a differentiating factor here that is really interesting that I picked up from some of the press releases. If we look at the CoinMarketCap press release, a story about this, hedera HBAR gains institutional access with launch of Canary Trust. Very cool. And talking about the announcement here, the Canary HBAR Trust is designed as a private offering, allowing qualified investors to securely invest in HBAR. And this is where it got interesting. The launch is reportedly part of Canary Fund's broader objective to pave the way for future exchange-traded funds focused on HBAR. So what this is telling me is there's a pathway that Canary Capital is focused on that gets us to an HBAR ETF, which is very interesting. The CEO of Canary Capital, also again the former chief investment officer at Valkyrie Fund, says, quote, "The accelerating demand for crypto offerings seems to be exponential since this year's launch of spot Bitcoin ETFs, continuing, yet there remains a gap regarding firms with institutional experience who are willing to continue to innovate and deliver solutions beyond retail products." So basically saying you got to have 1 foot in retail, 1 foot in institutional investing principles and ride that line. And I think that HBAR is kind of in a great position for that. As much as we can kind of criticize Hedera's approach to these kinds of things, that ultra conservative approach might make it interesting for some of these institutions to tap into. So Canary Capital. Now, of course, I read this and I go, well, is that, this is CoinMarketCap. Like, who wrote this article? By BC, like who knows? Like what does this mean? Is this even real? So I looked a little further and I saw another article that actually, the headline is Hedera ETF next in line after first US HBAR Trust launch? So similar content here, obviously a very substantial announcement. And then I go over to the HBAR Foundation post by Greg Bell, who I think is probably really behind a lot of the momentum with Canary Capital. And right here, where is this? Here we go. The launch of the trust potentially paves a path for future ETF HBAR-focused investment vehicles as investors seek new ways to access cryptocurrency. So that's a very interesting observation with this. And it gets me thinking. So Canary Capital, U.S. institutional access point. We've really been needing this. We saw announcements last week regarding custodial solutions and also BitGo's USDS stablecoin. So there's all of these very interesting things happening when it comes to altcoins and stablecoins. And then you look at Hedera and how it's positioned, especially with the, stablecoin studio and asset tokenization studio that recently launched. It starts to paint a really compelling picture. And then you add on top of that, the possibility of an HBAR ETF, then it really starts to get interesting. So this is one we're going to watch pretty closely, and we're going to have to see what comes of it. I think Canary Capital is not going to be the first, or sorry, not going to be the last. I definitely think that we're potentially going to start seeing more institutions kind of like come in with these access points to the Hedera ecosystem, because again, as much as we criticize Hedera's approach, it does make HBAR an attractive asset to investors that are looking to either enable use cases on the network, have exposure to kind of the enterprise side of crypto with the risks that entails. And then it also really highlights, the staking component. And we talked last week with Brian from Hashpoint Research about the yield being real yield. And so, although I agree that there is a need to, get the staking number up, it is interesting to know that the yield on HBAR is a real yield, and it's going to be interesting to see some of these use cases come online. I think of FSCO. I think of, some of the different things we've been talking about over the past few weeks. What impact is that going to have on the network? Are they just going to be HCS use cases, or are we going to start to see more use cases heavily leveraging the token service, all these different types of things? I think about the Hyundai Kia use case that Eric Piccini, CEO of Hashgraph, spoke of. A lot of very, very interesting stuff going down.